Arnold Schwarzenegger flexed his biceps, veins popping, muscles gleaming under the harsh gym lights. The crowd erupted in cheers and whistles as he turned, striking pose after pose, each one bigger and more imposing than the last. He laughed heartily, a booming sound that filled the space. "Muscles beat speed every time," he declared, his voice full of pride and absolute certainty. Every eye in the room seemed glued to him, and for a moment, it felt like nothing else in the world could compete with the raw, monumental power he radiated. The gym was alive with energy, the clanging of weights, the shuffle of sneakers against the floor, and the excited murmurs of spectators all blending into a symphony of anticipation. Arnold's gaze swept across the room, daring anyone to challenge him. His confidence was palpable. He carried the aura of someone who had conquered not just the world of bodybuilding but the very idea of strength itself. And then, quietly, almost imperceptibly, the atmosphere shifted. A small, wiry figure appeared at the far end of the mat. He moved with an almost liquid grace, each step measured, calm, deliberate. There was no shouting, no dramatic entrance, just a quiet confidence that seemed to radiate from every fiber of his being. Bruce Lee. The crowd noticed him immediately, whispering among themselves. How could this slender man even hope to match the towering figure of Arnold Schwarzenegger? But there was something magnetic about his presence, a sense that he was not here to perform, but to demonstrate something far deeper than size or brawn. His eyes, calm and focused, scanned the room without arrogance. Every movement was precise, every gesture intentional. Arnold smirked at the newcomer, a mixture of amusement and challenge playing on his face. "You're fast, little man," he called out, "but speed can't beat raw power." Laughter rippled through the audience, some echoing Arnold's confidence, others secretly wondering how this would play out. Bruce Lee merely smiled, a faint curve of the lips that spoke of unwavering confidence and control. "Speed isn't about moving quickly," he said softly, almost to himself. "It's about moving wisely." The tension in the gym was electric. Every eye followed Bruce as he approached the mat, Arnold standing firm, muscles coiled like a spring ready to explode. The next 30 seconds would prove a lesson no one there would ever forget. And as the crowd held their breath, the unthinkable was about to unfold, a moment where strength would meet precision, power would meet skill, and humility would meet reality. It was a crowded afternoon at the old Hong Kong training hall, the kind of place where history seemed to hang in the air, mixed with the faint smell of sweat and liniment. Sunlight filtered through dusty windows, catching particles in the air and turning the entire gym into a golden haze. The clatter of weights, the rhythmic thuds of fists hitting pads, and the occasional shouted instruction blended into a constant hum of disciplined chaos. Arnold Schwarzenegger, towering above everyone else in the hall, moved with the confidence of a man who had conquered not just his body, but the very concept of strength itself. He strutted from corner to corner, flexing his massive biceps, showing off every curve and definition he had spent years sculpting. Every eye in the room followed him, some with awe, others with envy, all captivated by the sheer presence of a man who seemed larger than life. He laughed loudly, a booming sound that echoed off the walls, soaking in the admiration like sunlight. For Arnold, strength had always been his superpower, the ultimate measure of dominance, and he intended to prove it once again. Arnold lunged first, every muscle coiled like a spring ready to explode. His fists cut through the air with raw, terrifying power, each swing looking capable of splitting a wall, shattering the floor, or bending metal. The ground seemed to tremble under the sheer force of his movement. The crowd gasped in unison, feeling the intensity radiating from the man who had spent a lifetime perfecting the art of brute strength. But Bruce Lee didn't react with drama or theatrics. He didn't leap into the air or perform flashy evasions. Instead, he shifted his weight subtly, flowing with an almost liquid grace. His body moved in perfect harmony with Arnold's strikes, bending and swaying just enough that every punch missed by inches, harmlessly slicing through empty space. It was as if the air itself parted around him, creating invisible lanes that Arnold's fists could never reach. The crowd's reactions ranged from disbelief to sheer awe. Some pulled out their phones, fingers trembling, trying to capture the impossible sight unfolding before them. Every swing Arnold threw seemed destined to land, yet Bruce remained untouchable, a shadow moving faster than the eye could follow. People whispered, some daring to cheer for the underdog, others too stunned to speak. Arnold's confidence began to waver. He had always relied on his size, his sheer mass, his overwhelming presence to dominate any opponent. But here, in this dimly lit training hall, every assumption he had ever held about power and combat was being questioned. He felt it, that momentary twinge of fear that creeps into the mind when reality doesn't match expectation. "Impossible," he muttered under his breath, barely audible over the gasps of the crowd. "How is he so fast?" Bruce's eyes remained calm, focused, and unblinking. He moved with intention, each step and each subtle shift conserving energy while maximizing effectiveness. His strikes were precise, his positioning perfect. When Arnold lunged again, Bruce used the man's own momentum, guiding it harmlessly past him, a silent demonstration that power without control was wasted effort. Arnold tried again, swinging wider, swinging harder, attempting to overwhelm Bruce with sheer force. But every move met the same result: air where Bruce had been, a faint blur where his body had just shifted, and a reminder that speed married with intelligence can outmatch raw power in an instant. The tension in the room became almost unbearable. Some of Arnold's fans shifted nervously in their seats, others leaned forward in disbelief. Even the trainers, the men and women who had spent decades in martial arts, were holding their breath. They had never seen anything like this, the perfect collision of strength and speed, but in a contest where speed clearly had the upper hand. Arnold's pride struggled against reality. Muscle, bulk, and brawn were all he had ever known, but here, before the eyes of everyone in that hall, he was forced to acknowledge something he had long resisted: that raw power could be outmatched, outmaneuvered, and outsmarted. For Bruce, the fight was almost meditative. Each dodge, each subtle step, each faint smile as Arnold overextended himself, was a silent lesson in humility, discipline, and precision. He didn't need to shout, to show off, or to dominate. The demonstration itself was enough. His control over the situation, calm and composed, contrasted sharply with Arnold's growing tension and disbelief. 30 seconds passed, 30 seconds that felt like an eternity to the stunned audience. When it was over, the room was silent except for the heavy breathing of two men at opposite ends of the mat. Bruce Lee stood perfectly poised, untouched, unshaken, a small smile curling on his lips. Arnold, chest heaving, sweat dripping from his brow, finally lowered his fists, the weight of reality settling in. The lesson had been delivered, brutally simple yet unforgettable. Speed, intelligence, and technique can overcome even the greatest strength, if wielded with mastery. And as the crowd absorbed what had just occurred, they realized they had witnessed not just a contest of skill, but a moment that would be talked about for generations. In just 30 seconds, Bruce Lee had done what no one in that gym had thought possible. He had used Arnold Schwarzenegger's own momentum against him, redirecting force, exploiting every overextension, and turning what should have been a display of raw power into a lesson in precision, timing, and the art of controlled movement. Every punch Arnold had thrown, meant to dominate and impress, had either missed or been subtly guided past him. Bruce moved with a rhythm and grace that made it seem effortless, almost otherworldly, leaving the audience in stunned silence. Arnold stood frozen at the center of the mat, his muscles still flexed, the veins in his arms and neck pronounced from the effort. Sweat glistened across his brow, yet his eyes revealed something deeper than physical exertion: pride humbled, certainty shaken. For a man who had always relied on the intimidation of sheer size, this experience was unprecedented. Every fiber of his being, trained for dominance and strength, now had to confront a reality he had never fully grasped: that raw power, without control or intellect, could be outmaneuvered, outwitted, and outclassed in seconds. The crowd erupted in a cacophony of reactions, a mix of awe, laughter, and incredulous murmurs. Some cheered loudly, waving their hands in admiration at Bruce's flawless demonstration. Others laughed, nervously at first, then with growing enthusiasm, as they processed the sheer impossibility of what they had just witnessed. Phones were raised across the room, cameras capturing every angle, every expression, every subtle movement of the two men at the center of this extraordinary confrontation. Older students in the hall, some of whom had trained for decades, whispered to each other in disbelief. "I've never seen speed like that in my life," one murmured. "And he didn't even raise his voice once. It's like he was dancing." The younger crowd was equally captivated. They pointed excitedly, trying to mimic the evasive movements, imagining themselves with the agility and intelligence of Bruce Lee. The gym, usually a place of routine drills and predictable patterns, had been transformed into a theater of suspense, every eye glued to the mat. Arnold finally lowered his arms, though his body still trembled with adrenaline. He looked at Bruce, who stood composed, almost serene, like a river flowing around a boulder, powerful but unobtrusive, perfectly controlled. The contrast was stark. Arnold's strength had been undeniable, yet Bruce's mastery of speed and technique had rendered it irrelevant in a matter of moments. Some onlookers approached cautiously, trying to analyze what had just occurred. Trainers discussed the precision of Bruce's footwork, the timing of his shifts, the way he used minimal energy to maximize effect. Students whispered about the philosophical lesson embedded in those 30 seconds, that true mastery often lies not in overwhelming force, but in understanding, strategy, and calm execution. Arnold, still breathing heavily, finally cracked a small, wry smile. It was the first hint of acknowledgement, a subtle sign that he had internalized the lesson rather than reacted with anger or denial. Slowly, he shook his head, a mixture of admiration and disbelief etched across his face. "I underestimated him," he muttered, almost to himself. Bruce, noticing the shift in Arnold's demeanor, gave a faint nod. He did not boast, did not celebrate. His victory was silent but absolute, communicated through action rather than words. The lesson was clear: confidence without respect for skill, size without respect for timing, and pride without humility could be undone in an instant by those who had mastered the subtler arts of speed and precision. The energy in the gym was electric. People were still recording, some replaying the footage on their phones, pointing out the moments where Arnold's punches had narrowly missed, where Bruce had seemed to predict every movement before it happened. Conversations erupted about the nature of martial arts, strength, and skill. Arguments sparked, debates flared, all fueled by the undeniable spectacle of what had just transpired. Amid the chaos, some spectators leaned forward, unable to contain themselves. "If you're watching this, don't forget to comment below where you're watching from," one shouted. "Smash that like button if you think Bruce just proved speed beats muscle. And make sure to subscribe so you don't miss more legendary moments like this." Phones and cameras raised again, people eager to share the lesson, the excitement, and the unforgettable spectacle. Even Arnold, finally finding his composure, allowed himself a laugh, the sound echoing through the hall. It was a laugh that carried respect, awe, and a newfound humility. He had learned a lesson that no weight, no amount of training, could teach on its own. Bruce Lee had demonstrated that skill, timing, and intelligence could rival even the greatest strength in the world, leaving everyone in the gym, and anyone watching later, with a memory they would carry forever. The crowd continued to buzz, replaying the encounter in their minds, sharing stories, debating outcomes, and marveling at the quiet yet undeniable dominance Bruce Lee had shown in just 30 seconds. It was a moment that would be told and retold, a defining example of how speed, precision, and intelligence could eclipse even the most formidable power. Bruce Lee stopped mid-step, his body perfectly poised, and bowed politely to Arnold Schwarzenegger. The movement was subtle but carried a weight that made the entire gym fall silent. Every eye followed him, every mouth hung open in awe. "Muscles are impressive," Bruce said softly, his voice calm yet resonant, "but speed, timing, and technique are what truly win." His words were simple, but in them lay a profound truth that had been demonstrated in the past 30 seconds, a truth that transcended mere physical prowess. Arnold's massive frame seemed almost to shrink in comparison, though only in presence, not in size. His chest heaved from the exertion, beads of sweat dripping down his sculpted muscles. For a moment, there was only silence between the two legends, a quiet tension as the weight of Bruce's lesson sank in. Then, slowly, Arnold extended his hand toward Bruce, a gesture of respect, acknowledgement, and humility. "I underestimated you," he admitted, his voice a mix of awe and genuine respect. Bruce Lee's faint smile widened just enough to convey approval. "It's not about underestimating anyone," he said, his eyes locking with Arnold's. "It's about respecting every skill, every discipline, every person who trains to perfect their craft. Strength is impressive, yes, but it is meaningless without control and precision." The crowd erupted once more, this time not just with amazement, but with appreciation. Some clapped their hands loudly, others whistled in approval, and a few shouted encouragement to the two warriors at the center of the gym. Every person present felt like they had witnessed history, a rare moment where two giants of human potential, one of raw muscle, the other of refined speed and skill, had met, clashed, and left everyone wiser. As people reached for their phones to capture the moment, recording angles of Bruce's fluid movements and Arnold's sheer power, a young student shouted, "This is insane! Look at the timing! Look at the speed. The energy in the room became electric again, fueled by admiration and the thrill of witnessing true mastery in action. Arnold, ever the showman, chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck sheepishly. I've spent my whole life believing strength is everything, he admitted. Today, I learned that power without control, size without intelligence. It can be outclassed in moments by someone who understands the finer art of combat. His words, honest and reflective, earned nods from trainers and students alike. They had seen him humbled not by words, not by reputation, but by action, by someone who had mastered movement itself. Bruce remained composed, his eyes calm and focused, even as the crowd continued to cheer and record. He knew the lesson was more than a display of skill, it was a philosophy in motion. The true measure of strength, he said, is not how much force you can exert, but how wisely you can apply it. Timing, precision, awareness, these are the tools that make mastery possible. And in that moment, the gym transformed. It was no longer a place of just weights and punches, it had become a living classroom. Every observer, from the youngest trainee to the most seasoned instructor, had absorbed a lesson in humility, discipline, and the power of knowledge. The fight had been brief, only 30 seconds, but its impact stretched far beyond the mat. Some students, overwhelmed by excitement, turned to the camera and shouted, "If you're amazed by Bruce Lee's speed, comment below, speed wins." Others echoed, "Hit that like button if you think skill beats strength." A few even added, "Don't forget to subscribe for more legendary showdowns like this." The audience, both present and those who would later watch the footage online, were encouraged to engage, spreading the lesson far beyond the walls of that gym. Arnold, now more relaxed, finally laughed fully, a booming sound that blended humility and joy. "I've always respected champions," he said, gesturing to Bruce. "But today, I learned to respect speed, precision, and timing as much as I respect raw power. That's a lesson I won't forget." Bruce nodded once more, acknowledging the respect given and received. Then, as quietly as he had arrived, he stepped back, allowing Arnold the spotlight, but leaving behind a mark that would be remembered forever. The room buzzed, not just with the thrill of what had happened, but with the understanding that true mastery required balance, strength tempered by intelligence, speed tempered by awareness, and confidence tempered by respect. And as everyone in the gym replayed the moment in their minds, they realized one undeniable truth. The 30 seconds of Bruce Lee's demonstration had taught them far more than any lecture, any training session, or any boast could ever do. It was a lesson in life as much as it was in martial arts. Arnold Schwarzenegger let out a deep, booming laugh, one that echoed through the gym and seemed to shake the walls ever so slightly. But this was not the laughter of triumph or arrogance. It was laughter born from humility and respect. His chest heaved with exertion, beads of sweat glistening on his skin, yet his eyes shone with a newfound understanding. "You've taught me something today," he said, his voice steady but filled with awe. "Power isn't everything." It was a simple statement, yet it carried the weight of a lifetime of lessons distilled into a single moment. The gym remained silent for a heartbeat, everyone absorbing the significance of those words. Trainers, students, and onlookers alike felt the transformation in the room. The energy shifted from amazement to reflection. Arnold, who had always been the symbol of raw strength, had been humbled not by defeat in the traditional sense, but by the realization that mastery and intelligence could rival, and even surpass, brute power. Bruce Lee, ever the embodiment of calm and focus, nodded subtly in acknowledgement. He did not boast, did not celebrate, and certainly did not seek attention. Instead, he quietly walked off the mat, his steps light and deliberate, leaving behind a lesson louder than any flex or shout could ever convey. Each footfall seemed to whisper to the crowd, true power lies in restraint, precision, and awareness. The contrast between Arnold's overwhelming physical presence and Bruce's serene mastery highlighted the true essence of skill, balance between force and finesse, strength and strategy. The spectators erupted into murmurs of admiration, the whispers growing into conversations as everyone tried to process what they had witnessed. Some of the younger students, inspired and wide-eyed, replayed the events in their minds, imagining themselves moving with the speed, intelligence, and fluidity of Bruce Lee. Older students nodded knowingly, recognizing the timeless truth that had just been demonstrated, that humility, respect, and mastery were the pillars upon which true greatness was built. Arnold remained at the center of the gym, the weight of realization settling in. He looked around at the crowd, then back at Bruce, and a genuine smile spread across his face. "I came here to showcase my strength," he admitted, "but I leave having learned something far more important. Strength without understanding is incomplete. Muscle without technique is like a river dammed, full of potential, but unable to flow." The metaphor was met with nods and murmurs of agreement. People began reaching for their phones, capturing Arnold's expression, Bruce's composure, and the overall atmosphere that had transformed the gym into a classroom of life lessons. Students were eager to document the moment, to share it with others who might learn from the encounter. The energy was contagious. Cheers mixed with reflective silence as everyone realized that they had been witness to more than just a display of martial arts. They had seen a philosophy enacted in motion. Even Arnold, usually the larger-than-life figure who dominated attention with his personality, embraced the moment. He raised a hand to acknowledge the crowd, his gaze shifting to those who had watched the entire encounter in awe. "If you're watching this and feeling inspired," he said, his voice carrying across the room and toward the cameras recording the scene, "smash that like button, share this moment, and comment below what lesson you take from it. Because this isn't just about martial arts, it's about life, respect, and learning from every challenge." Bruce, walking toward the exit, cast one last glance over his shoulder. There was no arrogance, no pride, only calm assurance that the lesson had been received and would ripple far beyond the walls of the gym. The crowd, buzzing with excitement, began replaying the fight in their minds, discussing techniques, timing, and the philosophical depth behind every movement. The story would be told and retold, each retelling emphasizing the quiet wisdom of a man who understood that speed and intelligence often outweigh sheer force. Arnold's laughter finally softened into a warm, reflective smile. He shook his head, almost in disbelief, but with a sense of gratitude. "I came here to show power," he said softly, "and I leave understanding it." The words carried weight, for they represented a bridge between two worlds, raw physical might and the subtle, precise mastery of skill. The gym remained buzzing long after Bruce had left. Trainers and students replayed the encounter, discussing it for hours, some even capturing the lessons in sketches and notes. The story would travel far beyond that afternoon, inspiring generations to come. It was a story of humility, of respect, and of the extraordinary impact that one person's skill, patience, and precision can have on someone who has known only the power of muscle. And even as the sun began to set outside the old Hong Kong training hall, casting long shadows across the mat, the memory of Bruce Lee's 30-second demonstration lingered like a quiet thunderclap, a moment that would forever remind everyone that true strength is not just about size or power, but about mastery, respect, and understanding. Strength without skill can be impressive. The sight of bulging muscles and powerful swings is enough to make anyone pause in awe. But as Bruce Lee showed Arnold Schwarzenegger that day, raw power alone is fleeting. It is speed, intelligence, and precision that transform potential into true mastery. A punch thrown with force may impress, but a strike executed with perfect timing and understanding leaves a lasting mark, one that echoes far beyond the physical moment. True greatness isn't about showing off, and it isn't measured by who can lift the heaviest weight or throw the hardest punch. It's about knowing how to act, when to act, and understanding the consequences of every move. Bruce's demonstration was more than a contest of speed versus strength. It was a living lesson in strategy, humility, and the quiet discipline that underpins mastery. Every movement he made, no matter how small, carried intent. Every step, every shift, every subtle dodge was a message. Skill without control is wasted potential, but intelligence applied to action is unstoppable. The lesson extends far beyond martial arts. In life, many of us focus on the obvious signs of strength, the flashy achievements, the loud displays of confidence, the symbols of power that demand attention. But often, it is the quiet, deliberate actions of those who understand their craft, who respect their own abilities and the abilities of others, that create the most profound impact. Bruce Lee's calm, measured response contrasted perfectly with Arnold's explosive power, showing that respect and awareness often outweigh raw force. Respect every fighter, every skill, and every person you meet. Because one day, the person you might underestimate could teach you a lesson more powerful than anything you've ever experienced. Humility is not weakness, it is the strongest kind of power. The ability to acknowledge that there is always more to learn, to see potential in everyone around you, and to recognize the value in every approach is what separates true masters from those who rely solely on brute strength. The crowd in the gym that day understood this instinctively. They had witnessed not just a clash of legends but a clash of philosophies, one rooted in sheer power, the other in speed, intelligence, and awareness. And when Bruce Lee walked away quietly, leaving Arnold humbled yet smiling, they realized that the lesson was eternal. It was not about who won or lost, but about how wisdom, patience, and precision could reshape even the most confident ego. If this story resonates with you, if you understand the importance of humility, intelligence, and respect in any endeavor, type respect in the comments below. Let's honor those who dedicate themselves to mastering their craft, quietly, diligently, and wisely. And while you're at it, smash that like button to show appreciation for the lessons of history's greatest warriors, and subscribe for more legendary stories that combine action, philosophy, and the timeless principles that can guide us all. Whether it's martial arts, sports, leadership, or everyday life, the same truths apply. Intelligence and awareness amplify talent, humility strengthens character, and respect builds bridges that raw power alone can never create. So the next time you face someone who seems smaller, quieter, or less imposing, remember Bruce Lee's lesson to Arnold. It's not the size of the muscle or the volume of the shout that matters. It's the wisdom behind every movement, the understanding behind every decision, and the courage to act with skill, respect, and precision. Because true power is silent. True strength is measured by impact, not spectacle. And true mastery is achieved when you combine skill, intelligence, and humility into every action you take. Let this story be a reminder and a guide. Type respect in the comments if you believe in the power of humility and intelligence. Hit like to honor the lesson, and make sure to subscribe for more stories where history's greatest warriors teach us not just how to fight, but how to live. Folded hands.